When you were working at the Stratford Shakespearean Festival, you were working with the likes of Alec Guinness, Anthony Quayle, James Mason, the kind of osmotic learning that you would get from people
well,
like
that's
that.
True. I once did Death Trap. I did Death Trap on tour. And I was in Denver doing Death Trap, and some people at Boulder had asked me to come out during the afternoon before the evening performance for a homemade Chinese meal. Some Chinese people were on staff at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I drove 60 miles out there, and they had lunch, and they made a Chinese lunch. It was great, and they poured a thimbleful of some Chinese wine for me to drink. Toasted, drank the wine, and somebody was with me. My wife or somebody was. We drove back, and they must have used MSG or something in the food, because I could see my fingers beginning to swell, and the wine went to my head. And I got to the theater, and I was kind of like dazed, and I went on in the play, and the effect of either the food or the liquor, the thimbleful of wine, made it so I couldn't remember what I was doing. I couldn't remember the rehearsal. I couldn't remember what had been pre-planned. It was all just coming out of me. And it was an extraordinary performance because it was dangerous. It was on the edge. And so that performance of Henry V must have been on the edge. Maybe I was trying to remember lines, but if somebody is speaking like they're trying to, and the words are just coming, that's very, very exciting and dangerous. It's walking the tightrope of a performance. It's not a safe performance.
So it wasn't a conscious decision to articulate the words in the way you did, and place emphasis on syllables the way you...
No, but I'd like to think they were done with the phrasing. I admire phrasing. Frank Sinatra, phrasing spoke to me. And so words, you don't think in terms, I don't think you think in terms, one doesn't think in terms of sentences. One thinks in terms of the key word that you want to communicate to you. So the word communicate comes out with the emphasis, and then everything else is, you can disperse with everything else. I want to communicate with you. I don't care about with you. I want to communicate.
I'd like to talk about that a little bit more later when we discuss your specific range of acting styles, of which there are many. But let's get back to some of the people you worked with just briefly, and talk about some of the roles that you remember playing that had significance later in your life. Some of the roles that...
I did 60 plays a year for 5 years or something like that. I mean, it was an enormous number. All the little dramas.
Well, let me remind you, Lucius and Julius Caesar, Lucretio and the Taming of the Shrew, the Duke of Gloucester and Henry V, Gratiano and the Merchant of Venice.
Oh,
this
you
was
mean
just a wide range of
Stratford.
training.
Well, at Stratford we were
experience.
We were a group of people at Stratford, and there were a half a dozen young actors like me, all vying for the roles. Each was a different type. And so we struggled for roles and opportunity, and wanted to play bigger roles the next year, you know, because we had the security of being a member of a company, but we wanted to be better than a member of a company, and God, in the form of Tyrone Guthrie, who was 6'6" and a huge pot belly and a hawk-like nose, and he would descend. The theater had a steep rake, so the stairs coming down from the theater to the stage and he would come down, and there was a tent. It was a giant hole in the ground with a tent over it. In those years, now they've put a hard building around it, but flat would open and the sunlight would stream down, and down would come, you know, Tyrone Guthrie and say, "You will play," and yes, I will play, and we minions moved around, and that's what those plays were. I played the chorus in Oedipus, and there were a dozen people in the chorus, all with football helmets on, and over the football helmets were blankets, so we were draped like Grecian oldies. And so, and then when we weren't speaking, and these masks were still, you could angle them and get, because they were just masks, but we learned that you could catch the light in these masks. And then while we were doing that, and the people were seated as close as you are to me, and I'd be performing here, it's theater almost in the round, it's three-quarter thrust stage, I'd move over and I'd brush up against somebody and I'd go by them. People in the front audience, they would know, because this was a mask. There wasn't an actor there. It was a strange being. Startled them out of their wits.
Tyrone Guthrie, tell me more about his influence on you. Here's a man who's larger than life, as you just depicted him in a godlike sort of form.
Tyrone Guthrie was a legend in England, and Olivier and all the great English actors of that era either worshipped or respected him, and he was in the forefront of many, many things in England. And then he came to Canada with that great reputation, and all of us little actors in Canada saw the horizon advance towards us. Birnam Wood had come to. And so we trembled at his sight. And he one time put his arm around me and he said, "Bill," he said, "tell me about method acting." And I said, "Well," and I began to explain what little I knew about method acting, the emotion you think. And he paused a moment and he said, "Why don't they think of a beautiful sunset?" And I kind of understood what he meant. There's a grander scheme in a beautiful sunset than trying to call up some emotion. He was a master at crowds and panoply and grand design, and perhaps less successful at here's how you read a line, or here's the meaning of those words, that you had to work on either by yourself or maybe there was somebody else there telling us. But he and his designers, they did extraordinary, really theatrical things. And you had to be theatrical in the milieu. You couldn't do small little work in a theater that was a thrust stage with smoke and incense billowing around you and gongs going and costumes with great veils behind it. And
how did his confidence in you, trust in you, and all the experience you gained with that particular company affect your confidence in yourself as an actor as you moved into the early years of television?
I never thought of failure as a result. It didn't matter, and I didn't fail. Invariably, I would get good reviews, or if I didn't get good reviews, the people that counted said good things, or I felt good about it. Any of those three terms were acceptable. All three together would be great. You felt good about yourself, the people around you felt good about it, and then you got good reviews. But so in the early years, it was just I was just soared forth, and as a result, I was very successful when I came down to New York and in the play that I was in Tamberlane, and then I was successful when I stayed and entered into live television. It just didn't occur to me that I would make a bad move. The concept wasn't there. It wasn't egotistical. It was just I was going to.
You were also taking the bull by the horn in a sense, because one of your first television forays was in a film called Dreams, which you wrote the teleplay for. Discuss